bacteria and viruses, and how that's the source of all life on this planet. And actually, we can get to that source. The biome is present under the soil in places like the Amazon rainforest, even Florida. And this is our real gold mine, because it has even a teaspoon of soil or under the soil has more genetic biodiversity than all the rainforests combined together on the surface. In other words, we now have the ability, with the right technology, the right cooperation between scientists, to resurrect life on this planet, all of it. In other words, we have the information, the genetic information that can not only resurrect life on this planet, repair the ecosystem. Now I'm going a little far out, but this genetic information could ultimately be teleported to exoplanets in distant galaxies, and we could seed the galaxies with all life, not just human life, but microbes, trees, plants, create biosphere, and actually seed the universe with life. But that's the big picture. Right now, Naveen, we've talked many times before.
Yes.
For our audience, please explain, first of all, what is the microbiome? We'll go step by step.
Sure. Yes, I think first of all, I want to thank you, Deepak, for introducing this concept of reinventing life. Because at the end of the day, somehow people have this misconception of what we get from a mom and dad, our genes are our destiny. What they don't realize is that is just a very small fraction of who we are in terms of the genetic material. Now, to introduce the concept of microbiome is a collection of micro means small and organism. So microbiome is the biome is the living life. So collection of small organisms that could be viruses, could be bacteria, it could be yeast and the fungi and the mold, and all of these come together. Now people think of these things as, oh my God, we need to get rid of them. What most people don't realize is it needs the human genes to bring you to life, but to sustain that life, you need all of those things that we call ick. That ick is actually part of us. There are 39 trillion, just think, 39 trillion living inside our gut. The trillion of them living in our mouth, in our noses, on our skin. I mean, they're all over us, and they make who we are. And if I may just repeat what you and I just talked about it just 2 days ago, having dinner together, to me was, I think this is an interesting concept that no one has talked about it. So I'm going to rephrase it for you. Then I want you to do it in your own words. That, if you look at it, the 99% of all the genetic information that's in our body is actually comes from these microbiome. So if you look at the human genes, they produce, give or take, about 22,000 protein coding genes. And our gut microbiome is producing somewhere between 2 million to 20 million genetic profiles. Now, if you would think that they're 99%, they would leave that 1% alone. But now, no. Even that 1%, the 99% of that 1% is actually can be changed epigenetically by the metabolites, or I would call them micropoop. All the things that we feed the microbes and the things that they release, call them micropoop, but technically metabolites, they change the expression of these 1% that's left over. So in some sense, as you said, 99.9% of all the genetic material is modifiable. So why we don't think we can reinvent life here? So I want you to explain that, Deepak, because I think you did it so beautifully.
No, you just said it. So 99% of the genetic information in the body is not human. It's what you just said. Actually, I thought somebody, one of these days I was at a conference, somebody said bullshit. I said, no, cow shit. Cow shit is earlier than bullshit. But shit in general is recycled star stuff. And all we have to do is look at the shit under the ground and in the ground in the primitive, non-developed countries of the world, in the rainforests and other places. And we have the source of all existence. But coming back to what we were saying, 99% of or more genetic information is microbial or, fungal, microbial, viral, whatever. 1% or less is human, but that can be modified epigenetically through the metabolites that you mentioned of the healthier mix of microbes, which goes back to diet mostly. But the genetic information, the activity can also be altered through other lifestyle measures like good sleep, meditation, managing stress, exercise, yoga, deep breathing, healthy emotions, connection with nature. Ultimately, I want to take this conversation all the way to self-realization, because I have a clue that actually even self-realization, or what we call enlightenment in Eastern wisdom traditions, the clue is right here in the expression of the microbiome, because that's the expression of all life, all life. It's the matrix. The planetary biome is the matrix for existence of life. And what we call the universe, now here's where it gets a little thorny with traditional physicalist reductionists. What we call the universe, the biosphere.
Yeah.
I'm looking outside my window. There's an atmosphere. There are trees. Okay, there's atmosphere. There's the sun and the stars. But the experience of that, the experience of the sun, the moon, the stars, the trees, the Milky Way galaxy, and everything I see, including this microphone, depends on life. Because without life, which is consciousness, there's no experience, right? Therefore, the key to even reinventing, not life, reinventing the universe is the microbiome.
I'm going to actually just continue on that thought process that, as you mentioned, that let's stay as human for a second here. Let's just assume we are not some manifestation of this consciousness. Let's assume we are just human as we know of us as humans. And we want to have this experience of human as in our own body. How do we enhance that experience? We call that healthy living, right? So one of the things that you and I have talked about is really interesting is there's no such thing as universal healthy food. That means it's not that spinach is good for everyone, the broccoli is good for everyone, all these things, right? In a sense, the food that is good for one person can be a superfood for someone, can be a kryptonite for someone else, right? Same type of thing, the supplement. People are today in this world, in this pandemic, people are taking these tons and tons of supplement thinking somehow they're going to make them better without realizing more of more is not good. In fact, if you take things that you don't need, you're only harming yourself. And there's not any universal healthy supplement. It's not that vitamin D is good for you. Too much of vitamin D is bad for you. Too much of, in fact, anything is bad for you. So you have to really understand what you need and nothing that you don't, and precisely personalize everything for you. The concept that I really wanted us to maybe spend a little bit more time, as you mentioned, is what happens in your gut is not alone. It connects to the brain. So what you feed yourself impacts how you think, your depression, your anxiety. In fact, Deepak, we never talked about the latest research that came out last week. Was addiction, which is really interesting to me. They took the people who were addicted to alcohol, absolutely could not live without alcohol. And all they did was a fecal transplant, change the microbiome inside their gut with a healthy person's microbiome. And their desire to take alcohol went away. Think for a second here. What just happened? They were controlling our desires of what we want. And when we talk about we humans are in control of what we want, what we need, what is ours, and look at these tiny, tiny organisms that we can't even see controlling our behavior, controlling our desires, right? And to me, not only what happens here when you're meditating changes your gut microbiome changes your brain. So it is literally, if I may say, we are a walking, talking ecosystem inside this larger ecosystem. And now we can say that, we are that manifestation of that consciousness that is all over us. We are interconnected. You and I may be now 750 miles away, but we are interconnected energetically all the time. It doesn't go away, is that right?
Yeah, no, but this has huge implications. First, it has huge implications into the very fundamental idea that the ecosystem is a system of interdependent co-arising, and that differentiation is not the same thing as separation. So normally human beings think, I'm here, everything else is there. And this is a perceptual artifact, because the idea is that my consciousness is inside my brain
Mhm.
and it is somewhere here. This is your Peter Diamandis is obsessed with downloading, as is your friend Elon Musk, obsessed with downloading Neuralinks and this and that, which is totally off the wall, in my opinion, because there's no consciousness in the brain. The brain is an experience in consciousness, just like the microphone is an experience in consciousness. The brain is an experience in consciousness. So are the microbes an experience in consciousness. All experience occurs in consciousness. You and I are having a human experience in human consciousness in what today we call cyberspace. But what is cyberspace? Cyberspace is shared consciousness within the bandwidth of electromagnetic activity. So right now, you and I are sharing consciousness in cyberspace, and there may be some people in China, Japan, Korea, Moscow, wherever. And if they're watching us right now, they're also in the bandwidth of our shared consciousness in cyberspace. Now, if you go to if you go to the wisdom traditions in India and elsewhere, not just India, also Japan, China, the Zen monks, and all the great teachings of non-duality, even in the West, they say outside the bandwidth of human experience. Right now, for example, I'm looking at you. I'm experiencing you right now
Yeah.
with less than 1% of the electromagnetic spectrum. Less than 1%. My experience of hearing you is less than 1% of the acoustic spectrum. And I call this reality. I call this reality. So less than 1% of my electromagnetic visual experience, less than 1% of my acoustic experience. And by the way, the same is true of taste receptors, smell receptors, everything. So with less than 1%, if you consider the body, let's say, an instrument of observation.
Yeah.
This is how I see. This is an instrument of observation. This instrument of observation is confined to less than 1% of reality. And so everything we know about dark energy, dark matter, 2 trillion galaxies, 700 sextillion planets, or whatever, 700 sextillion stars, uncountable trillions of planets, microbes, rainforests, Wall Street, everything we know is based on an experience of less than 1% of what is possible. Now, what we are told also is outside this bandwidth of human experience, other species have their own bandwidths of human experience. So when a honeybee goes to look for honey, it goes, finds the honey, then it comes back to its hive. It does something called a waggle dance. It dances for about 5 seconds. And all the other bees in the hive know exactly where to go for that particular flavor of honey. So what is that communication? It's a different bandwidth of reality, right? What is a snake doing? It's exploring bandwidth of reality through infrared. Okay, all insects through ultraviolet, on and on. A bat through the echo of ultrasound. So what we call the physical universe is a less than 1% bandwidth of perceptual activity in human consciousness. Now you break the boundary of this, and there's infinite bandwidths out there. Each species has its own bandwidth, and yet if you have a dog or a cat, you can communicate with the cat, even though when you call the cat by its name, it probably doesn't hear the sound that you hear because it has a different nervous system. So what is reality? We call reality the bandwidth of human experience here. But now that we understand the microbiome, the planetary biome, each organism is creating its own bandwidth of experience.
Yes.
And the collective experience of all these organisms put together is the qualia matrix, which is giving the experience of the universe.
That is actually, that is right. So Deepak, I think you have touched on something really, really important. I just want to emphasize, because I think most people may get lost here, that, our human body, the thing we are sensing is through these sensors. These sensors are extremely crude, as you see. They miss 99% of the information. And that is literally the whole reality based on some crude sensors. It's like somebody says, by looking at you, I can tell you what your genes are being expressed. I mean, that's just not possible. Right? Because then you need a very, very specific sensors to be able to analyze every gene expression. But I think now every species have their own sensors, and they actually interpret that sensory information in their own bandwidth. But I think as we start to look at this ecosystem that you described, the trillions of these microbes having their own bandwidth allows us to have a sensory perception that is substantially bigger than what we were born as human, just with human bandwidth. And that's why I believe once you start to understand the whole ecosystem that's around us and start to get in tune in the homeostasis with all of that, that is what I think is going to be a pure consciousness. And I don't know, I want to take a leap of faith here. As Eastern philosophy, we talk about, the Brahma, the creator of life. Now, I wonder, why does it always starts at the navel? Could it be it's pointing to the gut microbiome that is literally the creation of who we are as a species? Or when we talk about the soul never dies, could that be the soul, the microbes that just go from one body to another body to in the back end, the energy, and the soul just floats, which is like microbiome just goes into the nature and becomes part of this larger planetary biome, as you say. And that's why we say the soul never dies.
Now, what you're saying is very exciting with a little minor edit, okay?
Tell me.
The organism itself, the biological organism itself is only an instrument, is a collection of sensors. So when people say, my soul is in my body, you can't find it, okay? Because the body is a multi-sensory instrument that the soul is using to have this experience. So where is the soul? You can't find it in the body. You can't find it outside. So this is why people say there's no such thing. Because where is it? Is it in the navel? You just said navel. No, it's not in the navel. The navel is the portal for the information coming from the mother and the father in the form of nutrients. So yes, navel is the portal. But where is this thing that we call the soul? And these days, people are talking about out-of-body experiences, so on, near-death experiences, all kinds of experiences. The fact is, we don't have an explanation for an in-body experience because there's no one inside you. So when you ask people, you say, where are you? They say, I'm here. They're not referring to themselves. They're referring to the instrument, multi-sensory instrument with which they're observing what we call the human universe, okay? So the moment you get what the Rishi said, you're not your body. Your body is an instrument, and not only is it an instrument, it's a changing instrument. And now with the microbiome, we can change the instrument altogether, okay? So if the soul is not inside the body, and if the soul is not outside the body, there are only two conclusions. One is you don't have a soul, which is what the physicalists say. But the other is it has no boundaries. It has no boundaries because it has no form. And because it has no form, it is infinite. Only the formless can be infinite. So Rabindranath Tagore, one of the greatest poets, sages of the world, he and Einstein met in 1930. They argued about this. And, it was in Berlin before the war. And, Einstein was a physicalist and one of the most respected scientists of all time. We call these physicalists in the science of philosophy, they call them realists. Whereas Tagore was not a realist, he was an idealist. And this argument has been going on since the time of Plato, because Plato was an idealist. His student, Aristotle, was a materialist, a physicalist. They argued about this 2,500 years ago. And actually, Alexander the Great was a student of Plato, not Plato, of Aristotle. So Aristotle was the scientist, physicalist. Plato was the idealist. Alexander the Great, who came from Greece, Macedonia, all the way to India, was a physicalist till he got to India. Then he studied Ayurveda and all the astronomical sciences. He went back to Greece and he actually created what today we call Greek medicine, which is the forerunner of modern medicine. So first of all, the argument has been going on forever. But here's the key now. Scientists are telling us, 2 years ago, not 2 years ago, 5 years ago, I edited a book with 100 physicists. And I'm not a physicist. I'm not even a biologist. I'm a medical doctor. But I said to these physicists, give me one thing in quantum physics, or what you call today's physics, that you all agree on. Because if I go to Wikipedia, I see what the math is of quantum physics, but then I look up the interpretations and there are 35 interpretations. So you guys don't agree with each other on how to interpret quantum mechanics. Is there one thing you agree on? And they did, which was wonderful. They said one thing they all agree.
Yeah.
Whatever fundamental realities of the universe, at the most fundamental level, there are no boundaries. That boundaries are created perceptually. Okay?
Perfect.
Now, if there are no boundaries, then it has to be infinite. Because even if the Milky Way galaxy is, let's say, 46 billion light years away from you, if it has a boundary, then it's finite. But something that has no boundary is infinite. And that is formless. So, when Einstein and Tagore met, Einstein said, and I'm paraphrasing now because Einstein is known for this statement, he said the moon would still be there if no one was looking. And Tagore said, whose moon? The human moon or a crabshoe's moon or a insect's moon or whatever? There is no moon unless there's a consciousness in which there's a moon that is experienced. They didn't agree. And finally, Einstein said, whatever you say, I understand what you're saying, but science is my religion. This is what Einstein said to Tagore. So he admitted that his theories of relativity were part of his religion because he believed in that methodology. Now, since then, today, if you ask scientists, and today, what's his name, Sean Carroll, the head of physics at Caltech, just written a book called Something Deeply Hidden. And basically the deeply hidden, what he's saying is, if fundamental reality is formless and infinite, then infinite can only produce infinite universes. Therefore, there are infinite universes, and infinite universes contain infinite versions of you and of those microbes as well, with permutation and combination. Now, with this science, we can say your soul will never be found by looking for it because it is the one that is looking. So your body doesn't have a soul. The body is an experience in the soul. The mind is an experience in the soul. In fact, the whole universe is an experience of the soul. So when a person dies, you say, where does the person go? Where does the soul go? It doesn't go anywhere. It's like saying, where does the space go right now? Where does the cyberspace go when the program is over? It's a ridiculous question. Soul doesn't go anywhere because it is non-local, not in space-time. And these microbes and this genetic information is the symbolic representation of species of consciousness, and biological organisms are instruments of observation. This is a huge leap for modern science. It's very difficult to accept them.
It's not, Deepak. Deepak, it looks like it's a big leap, but think about it for a second. The sand that grain of sand doesn't experience the moon in the same full moon experience that you and I do, or the way, as you say, the bats or the fishes do, or something that is 5,000 feet down under the ocean, complete darkness. What is that experience of the moon they have? Is they don't think the moon exists. And so what happens to the moon when they are not, the moon is not there?
Yeah, actually, horseshoe crabs that live at the bottom of the sea have no experience on the moon, but on a full moon night, they'll come to the surface, they'll mate and lay eggs. Their life depends on the cycles of the moon with a different experience of the moon altogether, which is not a human experience.
So I'm going to now bring it back to the earth here and not the consciousness. You are a doctor. And you probably, as a doctor, would have never believed what we are learning now. That somebody came to you and they say, they changed their diet and now they no longer have a particular disease. Normally, you would have said, I think, you know what, you need to get some medicine because your mind is not working. It must be a placebo. It can never happen. And what we are realizing is the food is the information that changes the whole experience of the body and its genetic entity itself, which is through the epigenetics. Food changes that. So I want you to explain that as a doctor now, that what is your experience of nutrition and food as a doctor, what you were taught and what you know now?
Well, as a physician, I was taught that, when patients came to me and they said, I changed my diet and depression went away, I didn't understand. Or they said, I changed my diet and asthma went away, I didn't understand. Or sometimes they said, my cancer went into remission, I didn't understand. I had no basis for it. But now we know the basis is that dysbiosis, inflammation, the genetic entanglement of inflammation in the body, the human genes and bacterial genes, that almost all disease, almost all chronic illness is linked to low-grade inflammation, and acute illness is linked to acute inflammation. Even COVID-19 right now, the younger people who are dying, they're getting inflammatory storms. So first of all, as a doctor, I changed my opinion that diet is not important in curing disease. It is. In fact, for the first time, I understand that you can actually cure disease instead of just treat disease, which is medically, if you say you can cure disease, then you're a fraud. In fact, that's what I've been called all my life, a fraud. Okay, but notwithstanding that, with what we have the information, you can cure disease. But something even more important that I'm thinking of right now is we have to interpret everything from evolution and how evolution occurs, and understand that if we understand really how the microbiome is the planetary genetic information symbolically representing the life of this planet, because life precedes. See, this is also a big thing in science. How did life emerge? How did life emerge from random movement of atoms? Nobody can explain how the atoms can create the mind, okay? The random movement of atoms. And this is called the hard problem of consciousness. The fact is, you have to understand only one thing. Just like space-time is a single entity, mass energy is a single entity, wave particle is a single entity, body mind is a single entity. Just the fact that you say, oh, I changed my food and my mood became better, you are separating the two, mind and body. They are a single unit. Wherever there's a molecule, there's consciousness. Wherever there's a consciousness, there's a molecule. You cannot separate them, okay? So the fact is, mental disorders, depression, and other phobias can be treated through diet, as can physical. But even more important, if we look at this pandemic, and this is what made me think a lot, because everybody's talking about a vaccine, right? And of course, hopefully we'll have a vaccine soon. But pandemics have occurred throughout the ages. Mutations occur throughout the ages. You ask scientists, what are the mutations from? And they'll say, oh, they're random. Okay, that's still the predominant worldview, is that genetic mutations, including mutations for cancer, viral mutations, are random. But then a few years ago, some geneticists started saying, inflammation might be toxicity in the environment. Now, of course, I don't like the word environment because I don't think there's any such thing. What we call the biosphere or the ecosystem is your body. If you put a rabbit in a vacuum, it dies. If you put a plant in a vacuum, it dies too. But you put them two together, they both live. Okay, so the ecosystem is one unified phenomenon. There's no biological organism and the ecosystem. It's one unit, like wave and particle, like mind and body, like mass and energy. Once you understand that, then not only you can repair the human body, reinvent the human body, you can reinvent the planet. In fact, the key to these mutations, even COVID-19, is a stressed microbiome. That's all it is. An inflamed microbiome which results in mutations. And unless we address the microbiome, the mutations, even if we have a vaccine, other vaccines will need because there will be other mutations. This is called COVID-19 because it occurred 2019. COVID has been present for 55 million years. Humans have been present for 200,000 years. So forget about getting rid of COVID. Actually the planet would be better off if humans disappeared. If all the insects disappeared from our planet tomorrow, in 5 years, life would cease on this planet. But if the humans disappeared, life would flourish because the microbiome would be back in full force. You'd have a better ecosystem. What I'm saying is understanding the planetary biome and human microbiome and the interaction, we now have the science to create a sustainable planet, including reverse climate change. This is a big deal, that a more peaceful, sustainable, just, healthier planet can be resurrected just by understanding the science of the biome.
But Deepak, my point is, it is not a big leap of faith. Just the fact during COVID, we stopped doing human activities for a few months, and you saw the planet completely thrive. The air quality became better. You saw in terms of the forest, in terms of the land, everything flourished. You start to see the animals start to come out, and everything's flourished. I mean, the fact you mentioned that, these microorganisms that we call the microorganisms, they have been on this planet for 3.5 billion years. Right, 3.5 billion years, and we have only been around, give or take, a couple of 100,000 years. In fact, they created us. We are symbiotic entity, and if you look at as we started this discussion, 99% is them. We are a container. I mean, for all practical purposes, we are a container for them to be portable. We can carry them around. We can feed them what they want. They control our desire. Right, to large
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Naveen, since we are ending our conversation, tell us a little bit about your company, Biome, and where you are now, and what do you see the future with the product that you have, just in conclusion.
Yeah. And I think, Deepak, so currently we look at the human body, and we analyze the human body from the gene expression, because that's really what matters. So we look at your gut microbiome, we look at the blood gene expression, I mean human gene expression, mitochondrial gene expression, your oral microbial gene expression, and trying to see what is really wrong, what are the harmful products being produced and what are the good products being produced. And then we give you the precise supplements and the nutrition guide to say eat this food and why, avoid this food and why, and then we make every single ingredient that your body needs. So if you needed 22 milligram of lycopene, 11 milligram of elderberry, 7 milligram of curcumin, we put them all in a precision supplement for each individual, made on demand. So our goal really is to be able to prevent and reverse chronic diseases, because we really believe that diseases like obesity, diabetes, the heart diseases, the autoimmune diseases, even cancer, depression, anxiety, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, these are all diseases that can actually be prevented and reversed. As you say, these genetic expressions can be changed. So we really believe one day at Biome, we believe that we will live in a world where being sick is truly a matter of choice, not a matter of bad luck. And I want to thank you for being our scientific advisor. You have been just such a great advisor in terms of really thinking about how human body works. And to me, every time I meet with you, the things I learn and my mind expands to be able to think about what are the possibilities. So I think we as humans, humanity is better with your wisdom. And I cannot thank you enough on behalf of every one of us. You have impacted our lives. So all I can tell you, thank you for being who you are. Thank you for
Thank
your
you. Thank
humility, and
you
thank you
for
for your wisdom.
doing. Thank you for what you're doing, Naveen. Now, our audience obviously would like to know how they can get their own biome tested. What's the website that they can go to?
They can go to viome.com. That's V as in Victor, because Indians cannot pronounce the word V as in Victor, IOME.com. So it is Viome.
Biome.com. Let's call this talk, and let's call this talk conversation, of course, between Naveen Jain and Deepak Chopra. But the title of talk, let's call it Creating a Disease-Free Society, Reinventing Life with Naveen Jain and Deepak Chopra. How's that?
Love it. Love it.
Okay, and then that's it. So, Carolyn, are you there?
I'm here.
So, the title again, Creating a Disease-Free Society,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Reinventing Life, a conversation with Naveen Jain and Deepak Chopra.
Okay.
And then, at the end, always give the link, biome.com.
Yep, I will.
Okay, Naveen, that was good. We'll,
Thank you.
as soon as it's published, we'll put it to 50.